The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Princess Charlotte stood near the grand entrance, her small hands clutching a worn teddy bear that had belonged to her great-grandmother. She was only 9 years old, but her eyes held a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. The palace was buzzing with unusual activity, servants rushing back and forth with worried expressions on their faces. Charlotte had awoken early that morning from a strange dream. In it, she saw her grandmother Camilla walking toward a line of guards, anger burning in her eyes. The dream felt so real that Charlotte could still feel the tension in the air when she opened her eyes. Something was going to happen today, something important, and she needed to be ready. The trouble had started 3 days ago, when a private letter meant for Queen Camilla was accidentally delivered to the wrong office. The letter contained sensitive information about royal security arrangements, and somehow it ended up in the hands of a junior guard who shared it with his colleagues. The guards felt insulted by certain comments in the letter that seemed to question their dedication and professionalism. They demanded an apology, but the palace officials refused, saying the letter was taken out of context. Camilla had been furious when she learned about the situation. She felt that her privacy had been violated and that the guards had no right to read her personal correspondence. The queen consort believed that discipline and hierarchy were essential in the royal household, and this breach of protocol could not go unpunished. She had decided to confront the guards herself, to make them understand the severity of their actions. Charlotte had overheard her father, Prince William, talking to her mother Kate late last night. His voice was tense and worried. He explained that Camilla was planning to address the royal guard directly in the morning. Without proper protocol or preparation, this was highly unusual and could create a scandal. The media would have a field day. The relationship between the royal family and their security detail could be damaged forever. The young princess understood more than adults gave her credit for. She had grown up watching her great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, navigate difficult situations with grace and patience. Charlotte remembered how the late queen always said that words spoken in anger could never be taken back, and that a true leader must think of consequences before acting on emotions. As Charlotte stood in the courtyard, she saw movement near the West Wing. It was Camilla, dressed in a formal navy suit, her face set in determined lines. The queen consort was walking with purpose toward the guard station, where the royal guard conducted their morning assembly. Charlotte's heart began to race. This was the moment from her dream. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had seen it. The guards were lined up in perfect formation, the red uniforms crisp and their expressions stoic. They had no idea what was about to happen. The head of security, Commander Matthews, stood at attention, reviewing the day's schedule. Other palace staff members were going about their duties. Unaware of the approaching confrontation, Charlotte made a quick decision. She couldn't let this happen. She had to do something, even if she was just a child. She remembered her great-grandmother's words about diplomacy and kindness. She thought about how her father always said that the strength of the royal family came from unity, not division. The guards were not enemies. They were protectors who had made a mistake. The young princess started walking toward her grandmother, her steps quickening with each moment. Camilla was now only 50 feet away from the guard station. Charlotte could see the tension in her grandmother's shoulders, the way her hands were clenched at her sides. This confrontation would be terrible for everyone involved. The guards would feel humiliated. Camilla would appear harsh and unreasonable, and the palace would be thrown into chaos. Charlotte broke into a run, her small legs carrying her as fast as they could across the courtyard. Several servants noticed her and looked confused, but no one moved to stop her. The teddy bear fell from her hands and tumbled onto the cobblestones, but she didn't stop to pick it up. She had to reach Camilla before it was too late. Her breath came in short gasps as she ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The distance between them was closing, but Camilla was still moving forward, completely unaware that her young granddaughter was racing to stop her from making a decision she would regret. Charlotte finally caught up to Camilla just as the queen consort reached the edge of the guard station. Her small hand grabbed onto the fabric of her grandmother's jacket, tugging with surprising strength. Camilla stopped abruptly and looked down, startled to find her granddaughter there, breathless and flushed from running. Charlotte, what are you doing here?" "This is not a place for children right now," Camilla said, her voice strained with barely controlled emotion. She tried to gently remove Charlotte's hand from her jacket, but the young princess held on tighter. "Grandma, please don't do this," Charlotte said between gasps for air. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, looked up at Camilla with a pleading expression. "Please, just wait. Talk to me first." The guards had noticed the commotion and turned their attention toward the queen consort and the young princess. Commander Matthews stepped forward slightly, uncertain about what was happening. The other guards maintained their positions, but their eyes followed the scene unfolding before them. Palace staff members began to gather at a respectful distance, whispering among themselves. Camilla looked around and realized that they were becoming the center of attention. She felt torn between her anger at the situation and her love for her granddaughter. The queen consort had been so focused on making her point on defending her dignity and privacy that she hadn't considered how this confrontation might appear to others, especially through the innocent eyes of a child. "I appreciate your concern, but this is a matter that must be addressed," Camilla said, trying to maintain her composure. "These guards have acted inappropriately, and they need to understand the consequences of their actions. This is about respect and protocol." Charlotte didn't let go. Instead, she stepped in front of her grandmother, positioning herself between Camilla and the guards. The young princess stood as tall as her small frame would allow, her expression serious and determined. "But Grandma, Great-Granny Elizabeth, always said that a queen must be wise, not just right. She told me that before she passed away." Those words hit Camilla like a physical blow. Queen Elizabeth had indeed valued wisdom above all else. The late queen had spent 70 years on the throne, navigating countless difficult situations with grace and careful consideration. She never acted rashly, even when she had every right to be angry. Camilla felt a lump forming in her throat as she remembered her mother-in-law's patient counsel. "What else did she tell you?" Camilla asked quietly, her voice softening despite her efforts to remain firm. The anger that had been driving her forward began to waver. Charlotte took a deep breath, trying to remember the exact words. "She said that the people who serve us are not our servants, but our partners. She said that everyone makes mistakes, and that forgiveness is what makes a leader truly great. Great-Granny told me that the crown is heavy because it carries the weight of mercy, not just power." Tears began to well up in Camilla's eyes. She had loved Queen Elizabeth deeply and had worked hard to earn her respect and approval. The late queen had welcomed Camilla into the family with kindness, teaching her the subtle art of royal diplomacy. Elizabeth had shown Camilla that true authority came from understanding and compassion, not from displays of power. The queen consort looked over at the guards, seeing them not as insolent subordinates, but as men who had dedicated their lives to protecting the royal family. They stood at attention, proud and disciplined, but she could see the worry in their eyes. They were fathers, sons, brothers, husbands. They had families who depended on them. One moment of poor judgment had put their entire careers at risk. Commander Matthews took a careful step forward and spoke in a measured tone. "Your Majesty, if I may speak, the men involved in the incident have been confined to quarters pending a formal inquiry. They deeply regret their actions and wish to apologize personally for any distress caused. We maintain the highest standards of conduct, and this breach of protocol does not reflect the values of the Royal Guard." Charlotte looked up at her grandmother with hopeful eyes. The young princess had done something incredibly brave by standing up to a senior member of the royal family. Most adults in the palace would never dare to challenge the queen consort's decisions. But this child had acted on pure love and wisdom beyond her years. Camilla placed her hand gently on Charlotte's shoulder. She looked at the guards, then back at her granddaughter, and finally at the gathering crowd of palace staff. Everyone was watching to see what she would do next. This was a defining moment, one that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. She could proceed with her confrontation and establish her authority through force. Or she could choose the path of mercy and understanding. "Commander Matthews," Camilla said finally, her voice clear and steady, "I will receive the formal apology in my office this afternoon, in private. The men involved will write a detailed explanation of how this situation occurred and what measures will be implemented to prevent future breaches of confidentiality. That will conclude the matter. Relief washed over the commander's face. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your graciousness is appreciated by all of us. Camilla took Charlotte's hand and began walking away from the guard station. The young princess felt her grandmother's hand trembling slightly, and she squeezed it gently to offer comfort. They walked in silence through the palace corridors. Past portraits of kings and queens who had ruled before them, each painting seemed to watch them with knowing eyes, as if the ancestors understood the weight of the decision that had just been made. As they turned a corner, Camilla stopped abruptly and knelt down so that she was at eye level with Charlotte. The queen consort's eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Do you know what you just did, my dear child?" she asked softly. Charlotte shook her head, suddenly feeling very small and uncertain. "I just didn't want you to be sad later. When Papa gets angry and says things he doesn't mean, he always feels bad afterwards. I thought maybe you would feel bad too." Camilla pulled her granddaughter into a tight embrace, not caring that her makeup might smudge or that her carefully styled hair might get messed up. "You saved me from making a terrible mistake," she whispered. "You showed more wisdom in those few moments than I have shown in days of planning and anger. Your great-grandmother would be so proud of you." They sat together on a cushioned bench beneath a large window overlooking the palace gardens. The morning light streamed through the glass, creating patterns on the marble floor. Camilla took out a handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes, trying to compose herself. She had not cried like this in months, not since the funeral of Queen Elizabeth. "Tell me, Charlotte, when did Great-Granny say all those things to you?" Camilla asked, genuinely curious. She knew that Elizabeth had spent time with all her great-grandchildren, but she hadn't realized the depth of those conversations. Thought back to the summer before Queen Elizabeth passed away. The family had been at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, enjoying the peaceful countryside. One afternoon, Charlotte had found her great-grandmother sitting in the garden, watching butterflies dance among the flowers. The young princess had sat beside her, and they had talked for over an hour about everything and nothing. "It was in Scotland, at Balmoral," Charlotte explained. "Great-Granny was telling me stories about when she was young and first became queen. She said it was scary because she was only 25 years old and everyone expected her to be perfect. She made lots of mistakes at first, but she learned that admitting mistakes and learning from them was more important than pretending to be perfect." Camilla listened intently, treasuring every word. Queen Elizabeth had been a remarkable woman who had guided the monarchy through decades of change and challenge. Her loss had left a void in the royal family that could never truly be filled, but her wisdom lived on in the memories and lessons she had shared. "She also told me about forgiveness," Charlotte continued, "and Great-Granny said that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. She said that when people hurt us, we have to decide if we want to be right or if we want to be at peace. Being right might feel good for a moment, but being at peace feels good forever." Those words resonated deeply with Camilla. She had spent the last 3 days consumed by anger and indignation. She had rehearsed what she would say to the guards, imagining their shame and embarrassment. But what would that accomplish? Would humiliating them publicly restore her sense of privacy? Would it undo the fact that her letter had been read? No, it would only create more pain and resentment. "Your great-grandmother was the wisest woman I ever knew," Camilla said. "And I see so much of her in you, Charlotte. You have her strength, her compassion, and her sense of duty. One day, you will make a wonderful leader, just as she was." Charlotte blushed at the compliment. She didn't think of herself as special or wise. She was just a girl who loved her family and wanted them to be happy. "I was scared to stop you, Grandma. I thought you might be angry with me for interrupting." "Angry? Oh, my darling, I could never be angry with you for doing what was right," Camilla assured her. "You showed tremendous courage today. It takes a special kind of bravery to stand up to someone you love, especially when that person has authority. Most adults wouldn't have dared to do what you did." They sat together for a while longer, enjoying the peaceful moment. Palace's life was often hectic and formal, with little time for genuine connection. But in that quiet corridor, grandmother and granddaughter shared something precious, a moment of understanding and love that would stay with both of them forever. Eventually, Camilla stood up and straightened her jacket. "Come, let's go find your father. He's probably wondering where you are. And I need to thank him for raising such a remarkable daughter." As they walked toward the private royal apartments, Camilla thought about the afternoon meeting with the guards. She would listen to their apology with an open heart. She would accept their explanation and their commitment to preventing future incidents. And she would do so with the grace and dignity that Queen Elizabeth would have shown, thanks to Charlotte. A potential scandal had been avoided, and an important lesson had been learned. The young princess had reminded everyone that mercy and understanding were not signs of weakness, but demonstrations of true strength and leadership. Prince William was in his study reviewing documents when Camilla and Charlotte entered. He looked up with surprise and immediate concern, noticing his mother-in-law's emotional state and his daughter's serious expression. He quickly stood up and moved around his desk toward them. "What's happened? Is everything all right?" William asked, looking between the two of them. He had been dreading this morning ever since he learned about Camilla's plan to confront the guards. He had tried to dissuade her last night, but she had been adamant about handling the situation her own way. Camilla sat down in one of the leather chairs and gestured for Charlotte to sit beside her. William remained standing, his protective instincts on high alert. He could tell that something significant had occurred, but he couldn't read whether it was good or bad news. "Your daughter just prevented a family crisis," Camilla said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and humility. "She stopped me from doing something I would have deeply regretted. She showed the kind of wisdom that your grandmother possessed, William. I'm still processing what happened, but I know that we are very lucky to have Charlotte in our family." William looked at his 9-year-old daughter with amazement. Charlotte sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, looking small, but somehow powerful at the same time. "Charlotte, what did you do?" he asked gently. The young princess explained the entire sequence of events, from her dream to running across the courtyard to stopping Camilla just before the confrontation with the guards. She spoke clearly and honestly, not trying to make herself sound heroic, but simply reporting what had happened. She mentioned the words Queen Elizabeth had shared with her and how those lessons had guided her actions this morning. William felt his chest tighten with emotion as he listened. He had worried constantly about raising his children in the spotlight, about preparing them for the enormous responsibilities they would one day carry. He and Kate had tried to give them as normal a childhood as possible, while still teaching them about duty, service, and the weight of their royal heritage. But he had never imagined that Charlotte would demonstrate such maturity and courage at such a young age. "I'm incredibly proud of you, Charlotte," William said, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. "What you did today required more bravery than most adults possess. You saw a problem, understood the consequences, and acted to prevent harm. That's exactly what leaders are supposed to do." Charlotte smiled shyly at her father's praise. "I just remembered what Great-Granny taught me. She said family is the most important thing, and we have to take care of each other. I didn't want Grandma to hurt herself by hurting other people. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense, darling," William replied, pulling his daughter into a hug. Over her shoulder, he met Camilla's eyes and saw gratitude and respect reflected there. The queen consort had been humbled by a child's intervention, and rather than feeling diminished, she seemed elevated by the experience. Camilla stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. She could see the guard station from here, though at this distance the men were just small figures in red uniforms. "I was so consumed by my anger," she said quietly. "I felt violated by the invasion of my privacy, and I wanted someone to pay for that violation. I wanted to assert my authority, to remind everyone of their place. But Charlotte made me realize that I was about to sacrifice something far more valuable than my dignity. I was about to sacrifice mercy, compassion, and the respect of good men who made an honest mistake." William joined her at the window. "My grandmother once told me that the hardest part of being royal isn't wearing the crown or attending ceremonies. The hardest part is choosing grace when you have every right to choose punishment. She said that anyone can wield power, but only the truly great can wield forgiveness." She told Charlotte almost the same thing, Camilla said with a sad smile. Elizabeth had such a gift for distilling complex ideas into simple truths that even children could understand. I miss her wisdom every single day. We all do, William agreed. But I think she left us something precious in these lessons she shared with the children. Charlotte will carry Gran's wisdom forward into the future. George and Louis learned from her too. In a way, she's still guiding this family, even though she's gone. Charlotte had been listening to the adults talk, and she felt the weight of their words. She understood that she had done something important today. But she also felt the burden of expectations settling on her young shoulders. Would people expect her to always be wise? Would they be disappointed when she made mistakes? As if reading her thoughts, William returned to his daughter and sat down beside her. Charlotte, I want you to know that you don't have to be perfect. What you did today was wonderful, but you're still a child. You're allowed to play, to be silly, to make mistakes. Great-Granny wouldn't want you to feel pressured to always be the wise one. She would want you to enjoy being young. Your father is absolutely right, Camilla added, coming to sit on Charlotte's other side. Today, you were remarkable. But tomorrow, you can go back to being a 9-year-old girl who likes ponies and ice cream and annoying her brothers. That's the beautiful thing about wisdom. It doesn't require you to be serious all the time. It just means that when important moments come, you know how to recognize them and respond appropriately. Charlotte felt relief wash over her. She had been worried that this incident would change how people saw her, that she would be expected to act like a miniature adult from now on. But her father and grandmother were giving her permission to still be herself, to still be a kid. Later that afternoon, Camilla sat in her private office preparing for the meeting with the guards. She had asked Charlotte if she wanted to be present, but the young princess had politely declined, saying this was something her grandmother needed to handle on her own. The wisdom of that decision impressed Camilla once again. Charlotte understood that her role had been to prevent a public confrontation, not to interfere with the necessary private resolution. Commander Matthews arrived exactly on time, accompanied by 3 guards who had been involved in the incident. The men looked nervous and uncomfortable in their dress uniforms. They stood at attention while the commander made formal introductions. These were not young recruits, but experienced professionals who had served the royal family for years. Their shame was visible in their lowered eyes and rigid postures. "Please, sit down," Camilla said, gesturing to the chairs arranged in a semicircle facing her desk. The guards hesitated, unused to such informality from a senior royal, but they obeyed. The queen consort studied each face, seeing not insolence but genuine remorse. The senior among the 3 guards, a man named Sergeant William Porter, spoke first. "Your Majesty, there are no words adequate to express our regret for what has happened. We violated your privacy and betrayed the trust placed in us. We allowed our emotions to override our professional judgment, and we understand the severity of our actions. We have prepared written statements detailing how the incident occurred and our proposals for preventing similar situations in the future." He handed over a folder containing the documents. Camilla accepted it but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and looked directly at the 3 men. "Before we discuss procedures and protocols, I want to understand something. When you read my letter, what did you feel?" The question surprised them. They had expected anger, perhaps a lecture about discipline and hierarchy. They hadn't expected the queen consort to ask about their feelings. Sergeant Porter exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering. "Honestly, Your Majesty, we felt hurt and insulted. The letter contained passages that seemed to question our competence and dedication. We've spent years protecting the royal family, missing birthdays and holidays with our own children to ensure your safety. When we read those words, it felt like our sacrifices meant nothing. That doesn't excuse our actions, but that's what we felt." Camilla nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "And that hurt made you feel you had the right to discuss my private correspondence with others?" "No, Your Majesty, we had no right," Porter admitted. "Our hurt doesn't justify our breach of protocol. We should have reported the misdelivered letter immediately without reading it. We should have brought our concerns through proper channels. Instead, we acted unprofessionally, and we accept full responsibility for that failure." The queen consort sat back in her chair and was quiet for a moment. She thought about Charlotte's intervention this morning, and the lessons Queen Elizabeth had taught them all. She thought about the kind of leader she wanted to be and the kind of example she wanted to set for her family. Sergeant Porter, I want you to know that the letter you read was written during a moment of frustration. I had just learned about a security protocol change that hadn't been communicated to me properly. I was venting my annoyance on paper. Those words were never meant to be seen by anyone except the person I was writing to. And they certainly don't reflect my true feelings about the Royal Guard. You and your colleagues are the finest security professionals in the world. I trust you with my life and the lives of my family every single day. I'm sorry that my careless words caused you pain. The 3 guards looked stunned. They had come prepared for punishment, not for an apology from the Queen Consort herself. Sergeant Porter's eyes became misty, and he struggled to maintain his composure. Your Majesty, you have nothing to apologize for, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We're the ones who violated protocol. We're the ones who must make amends. Yes, you made a serious mistake, Camilla agreed. But I contributed to the situation by writing things I didn't truly mean, and by planning to confront you publicly this morning. 2 wrongs don't make a right. We all have lessons to learn from this incident. She opened the folder and quickly scanned the documents. The guards had been thorough in their analysis, identifying exactly where procedures had failed and proposing multiple safeguards to prevent future breaches of confidentiality. Their proposals were professional and well thought out, showing that they took the matter seriously. These recommendations are excellent, Camilla said. Commander Matthews, I want you to implement these changes immediately. And I want to add one more requirement. All members of the Royal Guard will receive training on how to handle misdelivered sensitive documents. They should know exactly what to do if they accidentally see something they shouldn't. Absolutely, Your Majesty, the commander replied. We'll develop a comprehensive protocol and ensure every member of the Guard receives proper instruction. Camilla stood, and the 4 men immediately rose to their feet. Gentlemen, I consider this matter closed. You've acknowledged your mistake, taken responsibility, and proposed solutions. That's all anyone can ask. I expect you to return to your duties with the same dedication and professionalism you've always shown. The royal family depends on you, and we're grateful for your service. The relief on their faces was obvious. Sergeant Porter stepped forward and bowed slightly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your graciousness today has taught us more about leadership than any reprimand could have. We won't forget this lesson. As the men filed out of her office, Camilla felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The anger that had consumed her for days was finally gone, replaced by a sense of peace and resolution. Charlotte had been right. Choosing mercy over punishment hadn't made her look weak. If anything, it had strengthened the bonds of respect and loyalty between her and the people who protected her family. That evening, the royal family gathered for dinner in the private dining room. It was a rare occasion when everyone's schedules aligned, and the atmosphere was warm and relaxed. King Charles sat at the head of the table, with Camilla beside him. William and Kate were there with their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. The younger children chatted excitedly about their day, while the adults enjoyed the peaceful family time. Charles had heard about the morning's events from multiple sources. Palace staff had been buzzing about how Princess Charlotte had stopped the Queen Consort from confronting the guards. The story had taken on almost mythical proportions in the retelling, with some versions making Charlotte sound like a miniature diplomat who had delivered a speech worthy of Winston Churchill. I understand you had quite an eventful morning, Charles said, his eyes twinkling with curiosity and pride. Multiple people have told me versions of what happened, but I'd like to hear the truth directly from you. Charlotte looked up from her plate, suddenly aware that everyone at the table was watching her. George elbowed her playfully, grinning, while Louis looked confused about what everyone was talking about. Kate reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. Encouragingly. The young princess took a sip of water to calm her nerves and then told the story one more time. She explained it simply and honestly, without embellishment or drama. She talked about her dream, about remembering Queen Elizabeth's lessons, and about being scared but knowing she had to try to help. When she finished, the table was silent for a moment. My dear granddaughter, Charles said softly, you have reminded all of us what it means to serve rather than to rule. Your great-grandmother would have been so very proud of you today. She spent her entire life trying to teach us that our power comes with responsibility. That responsibility includes knowing when to show mercy. You learned that lesson well. Camilla reached across the table and took Charlotte's hand. You saved me from making a terrible mistake, sweetheart. More importantly, you taught me that wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. I will never forget what you did today, and I promise to try to live up to the example you set. George, who was 11 and often acted more mature than his age, spoke up. Charlotte, you're braver than I am. I would have been too scared to stop Grandma. I would have just told Dad and let him deal with it. That would have been a perfectly reasonable response to, William interjected, not wanting George to feel inadequate. There's no single right way to handle difficult situations. Charlotte acted on instinct and wisdom, but seeking help from a parent is also a smart choice. The important thing is recognizing when something is wrong and having the courage to do something about it, whatever that something might be. Kate looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. She worried that Charlotte would now be placed on a pedestal, expected to always be the wise and mature one. Children needed room to grow, to experiment, to fail, and learn from their failures. Charlotte, darling, you did something wonderful today, but you're still my little girl. Tomorrow morning, I expect you'll go back to arguing with your brothers and leaving your room messy and all the normal things 9-year-olds do. That's perfectly fine. One moment of wisdom doesn't mean you have to be perfect all the time. Mama's right, Charlotte agreed. I'm definitely going to annoy George tomorrow. He borrowed my book and hasn't given it back yet. Everyone laughed, and the tension that had been building around the conversation dissolved. Louis, who was only 6 and had been following the adult conversation with limited comprehension, seized the opportunity to tell everyone about the frog he had found in the garden. The dinner continued with the comfortable chaos of family life, where serious moments were balanced with silliness and everyday concerns. After dinner, Camilla asked Charlotte to walk with her in the palace gardens. The evening was mild and pleasant, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They walked along the gravel paths, past carefully manicured hedges and flower beds that had been tended by royal gardeners for generations. Charlotte, I want to give you something, Camilla said. Stopping near a stone bench under an ancient oak tree, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm attached to it, a tiny crown with a heart in its center. This belonged to your great-grandmother, Camilla explained, as she fastened the bracelet around Charlotte's wrist. She gave it to me years ago when I was struggling to find my place in this family. She told me that wearing a crown, whether literal or figurative, meant carrying love and responsibility in equal measure. The heart reminds us to lead with compassion, and the crown reminds us of our duty. She would want you to have it now. Charlotte looked at the bracelet, feeling the weight of its history and meaning. I'll take good care of it, Grandma, and I'll try to remember what it represents. I know you will, my dear, Camilla said, sitting down on the bench and patting the space beside her. Charlotte joined her, and they sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky darken and listening to the evening sounds of birds settling in for the night. Can I ask you something, Grandma? Charlotte said after a while. Of course. Anything. You think Great-Granny knew? When she was talking to me that day in Scotland, do you think she knew I would need those lessons someday? Camilla considered the question carefully. I think your great-grandmother understood that the lessons she taught weren't just for specific situations. She was giving you tools that you could use throughout your life, whenever you faced difficult choices. She probably didn't know exactly when or how you'd need her wisdom, but she knew that someday you would. And today, when that moment came, you were ready. Charlotte nodded, satisfied with that answer. She looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, running her finger over the tiny charm. She thought about Queen Elizabeth, about the long conversations they'd had, about the patient way her great-grandmother had answered all her questions. She felt connected to something bigger than herself, part of a long line of women who had tried to serve with grace and wisdom. I miss her, Charlotte whispered. I miss her too, Camilla replied, putting her arm around her granddaughter. But she's still with us in the lessons she taught and the love she shared. Today, you proved that. You brought her wisdom to life in a way that helped not just me, but everyone involved in that situation. That's a beautiful legacy, Charlotte. That's immortality. They sat together as darkness fell completely, and the palace lights began to glow in the windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities. But tonight there was only peace, connection, and the quiet knowledge that love and wisdom could change everything.